In Egypt, a 5-story building collapses, claiming at least 9 lives.
Authorities say 4 people were rushed to the hospital for medical attention. More details on this later in the news. Good evening, I am Gianna Llanes.
I am Nina Richie Alago Flores. This is Mata ng Agila International. Now for the headlines. President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. inks Maharlika Investment Fund into law.
Mr. President.
ICC rejects Philippines' appeal to halt probe in drug war case. Washington and Beijing top diplomats hold talks on climate change. G20 nations gather to address debt crisis in developing countries. And pop singer Taylor Swift holds 4 albums in US top 10 at once. President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. signs a Maharlika Investment Fund or MIF Act, the Philippines' first sovereign wealth fund to support economic goals. Elijah Villanueva has the details.
We mark today a momentous occasion in the history of our nation as I sign into law the Maharlika Investment Fund Act. The MIF is a bold step towards our country's meaningful economic transformation. Just as we are recovering from the adverse effects of the pandemic, we are now ready to enter a new age of sustainable progress, robust stability, and broad-based empowerment.
President Marcos emphasizes transparency and good governance in managing the MIF. The fund will invest in agriculture, infrastructure, and digitalization, among others. It will attract external financing to reduce the government's burden on taxes and borrowings. Maharlika Investments Corporation, or MIC, will be formed as the sole vehicle for mobilizing and utilizing the MIF for investments. The MIC is expected to have 75 billion pesos in capital this year. 50 billion are sourced from the Land Bank of the Philippines and 25 billion from the Development Bank of the Philippines.
We take one step in our journey towards success, a journey that is fueled by our ambition and the unwavering spirit of the Filipino people. Let us embrace this opportunity with open hearts and minds, confident in our ability to shape our own destiny and create a future where no dream is too big, no aspiration is beyond reach. That is the dream. That is what the fund is for. We hope to fuel that dream.
Elijah Villanueva for Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. introduces ELGU and e-report systems to speed up digitalization in the Philippines. He calls for a stronger cooperation among the Philippine government agencies on the national launch of the Electronic Local Government Unit. President Marcos urges Department of Information and Communications Technology, the Department of Interior and Local Government, and LGUs to implement the Executive Order Number 32 for telecommunications and infrastructure projects. EO Number 32 will allow digital transformation for the telecommunication industry in the construction, installation, repair operation, maintenance, and internet infrastructure. ELGU system provides a wide range of local government services that includes business permit, licensing, local tax processing and civil registration, real property tax, barangay clearance, and information dissemination. The system will strengthen the capability of the Philippine National Police and Bureau of Fire Protection to respond to emergencies. Meanwhile, 210 out of 894 LGUs, integrated business permits, and licensing systems users were transitioned to ELGU system by the DIC this month.
Department of Science and Technology, or DOST, says it anchored its programs on the 4 pillars of the Marcos administration. Such pillars are the promotion of human well-being, wealth creation, and protection and sustainability. According to DOST Chief Renato Solidum Jr., the agency refocuses its major programs to align with the socio-economic agenda of the President. He adds that the agency contributed to job creation through the Small Enterprise Technology Upgrading Program, or SETUP, generating almost 7,000 jobs from July 2022 to March 2023. DOST also assisted other departments, such as the Agriculture Agency, in strengthening the agricultural sector via the development of value chain models and supply chain maps. The DOST chief also adds the agency's support in the health sector through OMIC Technologies for Health programs, which seeks to the growth of precision medicines, diagnostics that support clinical practice guidelines and policies in the country.
Justice Chief Crispin Remulla says the Immigration Bureau would hold the apprehended suspects during the raid on a Philippine offshore gaming operation facility in Las Piñas City last June 27. According to Remulla, the infractions of visa conditions will be a sufficient basis for the Bureau of Immigration to detain the foreign nationals. The Justice Chief notes that the foreigners are being held in legal custody due to investigation for violating their visas. He adds that the suspects will be kept in the raided POGO headquarters. Philippine National Police Anti-Cybercrime Group rescued approximately 2,000 people, including Filipinos.
The International Criminal Court, or ICC, appeals chamber denies the Philippines' request to halt their probe into the anti-drug operations during the Duterte administration. Natalie Pichi tells us more.
Solicitor General Menardo Guevara states that the country can no longer file further appeals against the decision. Justice Secretary Jesus Crispin Remulla asserts that the country will not cooperate with the ICC if it issues arrest warrants related to the drug war killings. Remulla previously warned that they will not be welcomed in the country if the appeal is rejected. He emphasized the importance of respecting the Philippines' sovereignty. He further criticized the ICC's involvement in political agendas, stating that the court should focus on countries lacking a functioning justice system. Natalie Pichi reporting from mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
The Department of Environment and Natural Resources, or DENR, says that the consumers of Angat Dam may expect water rationing if the rains stop. Environment Secretary Antonia Yulo Loizaga states that there is no water crisis for now and the water supply is still enough. Tropical Depression Dodong and the southwest monsoon helped to replenish the water level in Angat Dam. The water minimum operating level of 180 meters last week reduced the water allocation. DENR says that the water level of 180 meters in Angat Dam is good to use for only 1 week. The Metropolitan Waterworks and Sewerage System, or MWSS, suggests building another water source like the Kaliwa Dam. MWSS Administrator Leonor Cleofa says that the population is over 20 million for the whole service area.
Central Bank data shows that overseas Filipino remittances rose in May 2023. Vin Pascua tells us more.
Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas or BSP records an expansion in cash remittances in May 2023 due to land and sea-based migrant workers. According to the central bank, overseas Filipino remittances reached $2.78 billion, 2.9% higher than in the same month last year. Meanwhile, the first 5 months of the year grew by 3.1% to $14.46 billion. On a year-to-date basis, cash remittances settled to $12.98 billion, a 3.1% greater than the 2022 level of 12.59 billion pesos. BSP notes the increase in cash remittances from countries such as the United States, Singapore, and Saudi Arabia contributed mainly to the increase in the first 5 months of 2023. Vin Pascua reporting for Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
Philippine Air Force and its United States counterparts expand their drills to parts of Visayas, Mindanao, and the West Philippine Sea. Christina Gira reports.
The Philippine Air Force, or PAF, joins the United States Pacific Air Forces, or PACAF, in the second iteration of their joint exercise dubbed COPE Thunder. According to PAF, a total of 1,272 personnel participated in the combat exercise, with 687 from the Philippines and 585 from PACAF. The joint bilateral drills focus on the deployment of more troops and aircraft in the Mactan Island in Visayas, General Santos City in Mindanao, and Zambales in Luzon. During the exercise, both troops conducted air interdiction and maritime target and air combat maneuvers off the waters of Zambales. COPE Thunder kicked off last July 2 and will end on July 21st. The drill initially began in the Philippines from 1976 until 1990. In 1991, the exercises were discontinued due to damage from the Mount Pinatubo eruption that year. Christina Gira reporting from Atana Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. states that the government continues to carefully consider the United States' request to temporarily host Afghan refugees.
We have made some progress, but there's still some major obstacles to us being able to do it. But we continue to consult with our friends in the United States.
The president acknowledges the Filipino instinct of hospitality but reiterates the political and security considerations. Last year, the U.S. requested the processing of special immigration visas for Afghan families. The request is still under review. U.S. State Department Counselor Derek Chollet states that despite the absence of a set deadline for the request, the U.S. appreciates the ongoing diplomatic discussions with the Philippines. President Marcos assures that a well-informed decision would be made before any action is taken.
Former Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte meets with Chinese President Xi Jinping, offering to promote bilateral relations. Xi warmly welcomes Duterte in Beijing, expressing hope that they could continue to foster friendly cooperation between the two countries. Former President Duterte extends his gratitude to China for its support in combating the COVID-19 pandemic. President Xi emphasizes that China stands ready to promote steady and sustained relations with the Philippines. The Department of Foreign Affairs reports that they are not aware of Duterte's sudden visit. Coming up, witness as the world remembers the legacy of Nelson Mandela. Leaders from the EU and Latin America meet for their first joint summit in 8 years. And panic ensues over Russia exiting the Black Sea grain deal. Stay tuned for more stories around the globe when we return.
We're in the sky! Kaya lumilipad na naman tayo. Sino ba itong uupo ngayon sa ating iconic chairs?
Finally, nag-guess na rin ako dito. Just canceled everything for you.
Talaga, ay naku, nakakatuwa naman. Medyo kakaiba ang ating papasukin ngayong araw. The Goodwill Resort with the Goodwill Cast. Woo! Tinur niya tayo sa kanyang bagong buhay.
Mundo.
Tamang-tama, pinag-uusapan sila ng lahat ngayon. Tingnan ka!
Ayan na.
Ayan na. Alam mo talaga siya, no? Yes! Tatlong
Ayan!
buwan! Kinasal ka na! Yes! Ngayon natin malalaman ang totoo. So now, let's spill the coffee.
Spill the coffee.
Yes. And we're here at Net25. Ito ang tahanan ng Corina Interviews.
Welcome back to Mata ng Agila International. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan begins his Gulf tour in Saudi Arabia, seeking foreign investment to bolster his country's struggling economy. He meets with King Salman and Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. Erdogan attends a Saudi-Turkish business forum to attract investments for Turkey. Similar forums are planned for the United Arab Emirates and Qatar. Trade between Turkey and Gulf countries has risen significantly over the past 2 decades, reaching $22 billion. This marked Erdogan's second visit to Saudi Arabia since their reconciliation after the assassination of Jamal Khashoggi.
Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida visits the United Arab Emirates, or UAE, discussing clean energy cooperation with top officials. Japan aims to offer greener and renewable energy technologies to support the Gulf states' decarbonization efforts. UAE Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan and Kishida affirms their commitment to climate action and clean energy in a joint statement. Kishida also meets UN Climate Change Conference 2028 President Sultan Al Jaber, focusing on global cooperation to accelerate transition to a net zero economy. The visit witnesses the signing of 23 cooperation agreements.
Taiwanese Vice President Lai Ching-te is set to visit Paraguay en route to the United States. Lai will attend Paraguay President-elect Santiago Peña's inauguration ceremony. Paraguay is the remaining South American country with diplomatic ties to Taiwan. Peña reaffirmed his commitment during his visit to Taiwan. Vice President Lai's visit to the U.S. has already caused tensions with China. China firmly opposes any official interaction between the U.S. and Taiwan. They urge the U.S. to adhere to the One China principle and not send any wrong signals to Taiwan.
United States climate envoy John Kerry visits Beijing to discuss the threat of climate change, along with mending their diplomacy on reducing global warming emissions. During the meeting, the climate envoy emphasized the need for a global leader on the issue.
The world really is looking to us for that leadership, particularly on the climate issue. Climate, as you know, is a global issue, not a bilateral issue. It's a threat to all humankind.
Meanwhile, China's top diplomat Wang Yi underscored the need for a healthy, stable, and sustainable bilateral relationship.
气候变化的合作，也是在中美大气候之下向前推进的，所以我们需要得到两国人民的认可的支持，需要有一个健康、稳定、可持续的社会关系。也希望美方能够对话有序、理性、务实、积极的政策。
U.S. and China halted their climate talks last year after Nancy Pelosi angered Beijing with her visit to Taiwan. Climate envoy Kerry also met with Chinese Premier Li Qiang as the two reaffirmed climate change's daunting challenge for the world.
Today, July 18, is the annual and global celebration of Mandela Day, where it commemorates the father of modern-day South Africa and his fearless fight for civil and human rights around the world. Prince Limonero has the story.
Created in 2009 by the United Nations, the day is a celebration of the life and legacy of the late liberation veteran and international icon, President Nelson Mandela. Nelson Mandela is famous for installing democracy in South Africa when the country is under the apartheid system. It is where the white people were in charge of everything in South Africa, while black people had fewer rights. With Mandela's continuous protest to change the country, he was awarded Nobel Peace Prize in 1993, which also led him to become the first black president of South Africa in 1994. With activities taking place in Soweto, South Africa, this year's Mandela Day will be observed under the theme Climate, Food, and Solidarity. It urges all to act in response to climate change, addressing the challenges of poverty and inequality. Indeed, Mandela has gone down in history as one of the most famous world leaders. And as the world celebrates Mandela Day and the anniversary of his birth, may he be remembered by many for promoting a message of forgiveness and equality. Prince Limonero for Matanang Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
The multiple heads of state held a private meeting with a delegation of the Venezuelan government and opposition in Brussels. The meeting saw Presidents Gustavo Petro, Alberto Fernandez, Luis Inacio Lula da Silva, and Emmanuel Macron, as well as the EU High Representative for Foreign Policy, Josep Borrell. Venezuelan Vice President Delcy Rodriguez and Venezuelan Opposition Chief Negotiator Bernardo Blyde participated in the meeting that took place on the sidelines of the Community of Latin American and Caribbean States, or CELAC EU Summit in Belgium. According to sources, the agenda was to reactivate the mediation process and the dialogue between different factions of the Venezuelan community.
Y ahí está. Yo envié a Delcy, vicepresidenta de la República Bolivariana de Venezuela, para llevar la voz de Venezuela, la verdad de Venezuela, en la cumbre entre la Comunidad de Estados Latinoamericanos y Caribeños, CELAC.
It highlighted the importance of finding political solutions that guarantee the validity of democracy and respect for human rights in the country. The EU was also urged to respect Venezuela's sovereignty in order to promote political dialogue.
Exigir que cesen las sanciones, que cese el bloqueo, que cese la agresión contra Venezuela y que podamos avanzar, ojalá podamos avanzar hacia nuevas relaciones con toda Europa, relaciones de respeto, de cooperación, de trabajo compartido.
Leaders from the European Union and Latin America met each other at the opening of their first joint summit in 8 years. Latin American and Caribbean leaders brought up the underlying racism due to colonialism and slavery toward former colonies. They also added that current-day Europe still does not treat their Latin American counterparts as their equals to this day. European leaders acknowledged and apologized, saying that the exploitation of the old guard had been fundamentally wrong and that they are adamant about arriving at a consensus. Tensions over the two blocs have led to the stalling of the EU-Mercosur deal despite months of preparation, with a joint final statement still in limbo less than a day before the closing of the meeting. Differing views towards the Russia-Ukraine conflict, trade, and transition towards a green economy have also done little to help bridge the gap. Central and South American nations were given economic assurance that the knowledge that their critical rare metal supplies would be welcomed in the Western market as the EU seeks to end an excessive reliance on Beijing's rare mineral resources. The EU also committed to spending 45 billion euros toward their CELAC partnerships over the next 4 years. Meanwhile, Russian President Vladimir Putin vowed to retaliate after a Ukrainian attack on a bridge linking Moscow-annexed Crimea to Russia.
Это преступление бессмысленное, с военной точки зрения, не имеющего никакого значения, поскольку Крымский мост уже давно не используется для военных перевозок. И жестокое, поскольку пострадали, погибли ни в чем не повинные гражданские лица. Ответ со стороны России, конечно, будет. Министерство обороны готовит соответствующее предложение. Из-за теракта серьезно повреждено дорожное полотно на нескольких пролетах Крымского моста. В результате на время было прекращено и автомобильное, и железнодорожное движение.
Russian officials said that the Ukrainian attack on the Moscow-built bridge killed a civilian couple and wounded their child. Moscow said 2 drones had hit the bridge in the early hours of Monday and blamed the Kyiv regime. Commercial flights to Moscow-annexed Crimea have been suspended after the start of the offensive in Ukraine.
The collapse of the deal that allows the export of Ukrainian grain through the Black Sea could have far-reaching effects. Russia pulled out of the agreement, saying its own food and fertilizer exports have been hampered. Thomas I. Likeness has more on that story.
The deal had allowed ships like these to enter and leave Ukrainian ports without being attacked. The grains these vessels carry are essential to countries in Africa, the Middle East, and Asia, where food insecurity is rampant. World leaders have criticized the Kremlin for its decision. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres says millions of people who face hunger will be paying the price.
Today's decision by the Russian Federation will strike a blow to people in need everywhere.
U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken echoes that, saying Moscow's actions are unconscionable.
The result of Russia's action today, weaponizing food, using it as a tool, as a weapon in its war against Ukraine, will be to make food harder to come by in places that desperately need it and have prices rise.
How soon those prices will rise is too early to say. Some analysts are saying the bump in prices will only be temporary. They say Brazil and Russia have increased exports, but those exports have longer shipping routes, and that means those products will carry a higher price. For now, world leaders and consumers alike are hoping that a diplomatic solution can be found so that exports from Ukraine through the Black Sea can soon resume. Thomas I. Likeness from Matanang Agila International, trusted, connected, on point.
The United States plans to work with other countries, especially those affected, to dampen the effects of Russia's exit from the Black Sea Grain Initiative.
Indeed, we are already seeing a spike in global wheat, corn, and soybean prices just today as a result of Russia's suspension. We urge the government of Russia to immediately reverse its decision.
White House National Security spokesman John Kirby specifically states that they will help Ukraine with their grain exports. Ukrainian Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba calls the Russians' move to exit the deal as highly irresponsible.
In the next hours and days, there will be very intensive consultations at all levels to find a solution to this immense problem that Russia has created for the world.
Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan states their recent intensified diplomatic efforts to ensure the continuation of the Black Sea Grain Initiative. He mentions that the Turkish foreign minister will meet with his Russian counterpart to negotiate a different trade deal.
Kendisiyle Ağustos ayında ülkemizde bir araya geldiğimizde tüm bu hususları görüşme fırsatını da bulacağız. Ayrıca Rus tahıl ve gübresinin sevkinin önünün açılması noktasında nasıl hareket edebileceğimizi de istişare edeceğiz.
The Turkish president will also meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has sent official letters to the UN and Turkey proposing to continue the Black Sea Grain Initiative without Russia.
Україна, ООН, Туреччина спільно можуть забезпечити роботу продовольчого коридору та інспектування суден.
United Kingdom's health service goes hourly as junior doctors demonstrate holding the biggest strike. From United Kingdom, Lee Lance Valdos for the details.
Hospital doctors in England on Thursday, the 13th of July, staged the biggest walkout in the history of the UK state-funded National Health Service, or NHS, prompting fears for patient safety. The unprecedented 5-day stoppage over pay and staff retention is the latest in 8 months of industrial action across the NHS, which is already reeling from a vast pandemic backlog. Because of this, nearly 7,000 doctors requested documents for an overseas job application last year, which is a record high. The industrial action by junior doctors who are below consultant level was scheduled to run until today.
Unfortunately, we're back here again with junior doctors on a 5-day strike, which we think is the longest industrial action in the history of the NHS. Since the last round of strike action in June, the Prime Minister or the Health Secretary haven't spoken to the BMA whatsoever, haven't responded to the letters, haven't responded to calls for reopening negotiations, and that's why we're here again.
Senior hospital doctors, known as consultants here in England, will begin a 48-hour strike on Thursday, with radiographers following suit from July 25th.
We've seen this current government is just not negotiating good faith with unions. We've seen that when a government does negotiate and come to the table, in Scotland, for example, an offer can be put on the table and can be put back to the members. Things are slightly different here in England for junior doctors with bigger real terms pay cuts, but it shows what can be done when a government does come around the table.
The BMA's Junior Doctors Committee says medics have effectively had a 26% pay cut in real terms in the last 15 years, as salaries have failed to keep pace with soaring inflation. Similar stoppages in June and April resulted in massive disruption, with hundreds of thousands of hospital appointments and operations being rescheduled. Reporting here from London, United Kingdom, I am Agila from Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
Medical profession.
Up next, about 1,200 children were evacuated from summer camp due to wildfires in Greece. Investigators found evidence from the Gilgo Beach serial killer case. And an Australian sailor and his dog survived 2 months in the Pacific Ocean. Please don't go away. We've got more stories from around the globe when Mata ng Agila International returns.
masasabi mong tunay na kaibigan.
Yep! At kapag siya'y natagpuan na, huwag mo nang pakawalan.
Ang tunay na kaibigan, laging nandyan kahit kailan.
Handang gawin ang lahat. Maging happy ka lang.
Gagawin ang April Song! Para sa'yo, para sa pamilya, at para sa bayan.
Tulad na lang ng inyong mga bagong kaibigan.
Tuwing umaga,
love,
Tunipet, and everything! Lunes hanggang Biyernes,
6:30 ng umaga
sa Net 25! Let's net together! Love, Tunipet, and everything! Tunipet and everything! Love, love, Tunipet, and
South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol has vowed to completely overhaul the country's approach to extreme weather from climate change. His pledge comes after at least 40 people have died in flooding and landslides caused by monsoon rains. President Yoon Suk visited areas hit by floods on Monday. He also toured a temporary housing facility. Torrential rain for the past 9 days has forced more than 10,000 people from their homes. In the central Korean city of Cheongju, rescue crews have recovered the last body and ended their search for survivors trapped in a muddy tunnel that flooded on the weekend. 14 people died after 17 vehicles, including a bus, got caught in the flash flood. Most of the water has been pumped out of the tunnel. Elsewhere, searchers using sniffer dogs are looking for victims of landslides. About 150 roads have been damaged and large swaths of the country are in the dark because of power outages. Greek police arrested a man suspected of starting a wildfire that is raging near the capital of Athens. Julian Bukayan reports.
Firefighters in Greece are battling the blaze that is being fueled by strong winds and the heat wave baking Europe. The suspect is described as a foreigner, but police have released no other details about him. There are more than 80 wildfires burning in Greece. Temperatures in some parts of the country have reached 44 degrees Celsius. Scores of firefighters, aided by some soldiers, are trying to bring the fires under control. They are getting aerial support from water bombers. The blazes have destroyed several houses. Meanwhile, some 1,200 children have been evacuated from a summer camp in the beach town of Loutraki after reports of a nearby fire. Forecasters predict the heat will intensify by midweek and continue into next month. Julian Bukayan from From Agila International, trusted, connected, on point.
In related news, about 1,200 children were evacuated from summer camp in Lutraki. This is after wildfires which broke in the country approached the camp. Authorities say dozens of people were forced to leave their homes. Several animals were also evacuated, including horses that were in stables that caught fire. Athens says that those residents affected by the fire are eligible for accommodation in local hotels as well as receiving compensation. Local officials say the wildfire spread due to strong winds. Emergency service says hundreds of firefighters are combating the blaze to contain the spread.
Millions of U.S. military emails have reached Mali, a Russian ally, due to a minor typing error. The emails containing sensitive data like passwords and medical records were sent to .ml instead of .mil for years. Although no classified information is compromised, the leaked data includes financial records, maps of U.S. military facilities, and official trip documents. The Pentagon claims to have already taken action. U.S. officials assured that classified communications remain secure.
The death toll in an investigation linked to a Kenyan cult that practiced starvation has exceeded 400 after 12 more bodies were found on Monday. The Paul Mackenzie-led cult death toll has reached 403 following the latest round of exhumations in the Shakahola forest. According to government autopsies, starvation appears to have been the main cause of death, although some victims were strangled, beaten, or suffocated. Investigators will continue its exhumation tomorrow for more graves in the forest. Mackenzie, a former taxi driver turned preacher, has been in police custody since mid-April. On July the 3rd, a court in the port city of Mombasa extended his detention by a month pending investigations. State prosecutors said he is facing terrorism or genocide-related charges, but he has not yet been required to enter any plea. Questions have been raised about how he managed to evade law enforcement despite a history of extremism and previous legal cases.
Investigators have received a flood of evidence and information related to the suspect charged in the Gilgo Beach killings. With the search warrant prompted, officials found between 200 and 300 firearms in a walled-off vault behind a locked metal door in Rex Heuermann's basement. The search of Heuermann's house in Long Island has largely been focused on forensics, but authorities are also looking for hidden items that could be souvenirs from the killings. Architect Rex Heuermann is facing murder charges for the 2009 and 2010 deaths of Melissa Barthelemy, Megan Waterman, and Amber Costello. He is also the prime suspect in the 2007 disappearance and killing of the fourth woman, Maureen Brainard Barnes. The Gilgo Four are among 11 sets of human remains that were found strewn across Long Island's South Shore between 2010 and 2011, launching what police called as one of the most consequential homicide investigations in the island's history. Despite Heuermann's arrest, the cases involving several other sets of human remains uncovered are still under investigation.
5 people are dead after a small plane crashed into a hangar at a skydiving center near Warsaw, Poland. The dead included the pilot and 4 people in the hangar. Rosel Ferry has more details.
Rescuers say 8 other people have been taken to hospital. One of the injured is a child. 2 of them are in serious condition. The Cessna 208 aircraft had been carrying 3 people. After landing at a small airport near Warsaw, it crashed into a hangar where 13 people had been seeking shelter from a storm. Weather conditions may have been a factor in the accident. An investigation has been launched. Rosel Feria for Matanang Agila International, trusted, connected, on point.
Rescue crews in Cairo, Egypt are combing through the rubble of a building that collapsed that killed at least 9 people. 4 others have been taken to the hospital for treatment of injuries. Jay Suarez reports.
The 5-story apartment building came tumbling down Monday. According to local media, The structure has been built without permits before 1980, when the country's construction law came into effect. The report cites the Public Prosecution Office as saying the collapse occurred after some walls on the main floor had been removed during renovations. The resident and contractor responsible for the work have been arrested. This is the fourth building collapse in Egypt in a month. A total of 25 people have died in these incidents. Building collapses are common in Egypt. For decades, the government has been lax in enforcing construction standards. Jay Suarez, for Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
Australian sailor Tim Shattuck and his dog Bella were rescued after drifting for 2 months in the Pacific Ocean. Shattuck survived in the ocean by drinking rainwater and eating raw fish. The two survivors left Mexico for French Polynesia last April, and their boat got hit by a storm. Rescuers used fishing boats after spotting them in the middle of the ocean. The doctor aboard says that he is stable and his vital signs are normal. Shattuck commenced his more than 6,000-kilometer-long voyage from Mexico City and became stranded due to bad weather.
In the United States, local hunters captured a record-breaking 19-foot-long Burmese python in Florida. According to the hunters, it took 3 minutes to wrestle the python into captivity. And as it stands, it is the world's longest Burmese python on record. Jake Walleri, the wrangler which caught the animal, brought the python to the Conservancy of Southwest Florida. In 2020, the previous longest python is recorded at a length of 18 feet and 9 inches. Finance ministers of the group of 20 countries and central bank heads meet to discuss a faltering global economy and help nations grappling with a debt crisis. Indian Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman said that the group has the responsibility to steer the global economy towards strong, sustainable, balanced, and inclusive growth. The meeting is set to discuss a debt restructuring plan for Sri Lanka and Ghana, which defaulted on their debt last year.
The world is looking to the G20 to make progress on key challenges like climate change and pandemics as part of our work to strengthen the global economy and to support developing countries. I'm hopeful we can take significant concrete steps forward in our meetings.
Global concerns have grown as spiraling prices of food grains and energy insecurity in the wake of the newly expired Black Sea grain deal and the Russia-Ukraine conflict, which may push some low and middle-income countries into debt and hamper global growth. Reform of international development banks, cryptocurrency regulations, and access to financing for countries to adapt to climate change are also on the agenda for the G20 meeting.
Today, our discussions highlight the commitment of India and the United States to actively further the G20 agenda, and these include addressing critical global issues such as strengthening the multilateral development banks and taking coordinated climate action, facilitating consensus to intractable issues associated with rising indebtedness of low and middle income countries, and harnessing opportunities presented by crypto assets and digital public infrastructure for financial inclusion.
Tens of thousands evacuated as Typhoon Tali makes landfall in southern China and Vietnam. The typhoon hit Guangdong province with winds of 136.8 kilometers per hour and caused storm surges along the coast. China issues an orange weather alert, the second highest in their weather system, leading to the evacuation of nearly 230,000 people in Guangdong. Coastal tourist destinations are closed, with rescue teams put on standby. Typhoon Talim is expected to move to the West Philippine Sea and make second landfall in Guangxi region. Vietnam is also bracing for impact, preparing to evacuate around 30,000 people.
Firefighters extinguish wildfires in Rabbit and Gavilan Moreno Valley in California. California Department of Forestry and Fire Protection reports that the Rabbit Fire has burned over 7,500 acres of land and property. The Gavilan Fire, located in the Paris area of Riverside County, has scorched 250 acres. Fire investigators are still searching for the cause of the fire. Authorities ordered residents to evacuate as fire warning remains. Meanwhile, the California Fire Department states that over 3,030 wildfires burned more than 10,000 acres in California this year. Coming right up, Google's Bard AI launches in Europe and Brazil. Australia pulls out of hosting the 2026 Commonwealth Games. And Taylor Swift sets a new record on Billboard's Top 10. Catch the latest in business, sports, tech, and entertainment. Mata ng Agila International will be back. Sony agrees to a 10-year deal with Microsoft to keep the Call of Duty franchise exclusively on the PlayStation. This is following the proposed Activision Blizzard acquisition. Microsoft Gaming CEO Phil Spencer says that Sony and Microsoft agreed to a binding agreement. The deal ends a competition between companies that contested both privately and publicly over the past year since Microsoft announced its proposed acquisition of Activision Blizzard in January of 2022. Microsoft's original offer to Sony includes keeping all existing Activision console titles on Sony, as well as future renditions of the Call of Duty franchise and any current Activision franchise exclusive to Sony till December 31st of 2027. Japan's workforce has experienced economic stagnation for more than 3 decades, which has resulted in the weakest wage growth for employees among developed countries. Bernadette Manuel has the numbers.
For years, Japanese salarymen have had their wages increased by just 1% annually, which has taken quite an effect on their buying power given the economic crisis and rising inflation rate globally. To the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, or OECD, Japanese workers currently have an average annual salary of $41,509 on the average compared to the $40,379 in 1991. While Japan's wages rose by just 2.8% over the period, average pay across the OECD climbed by 32.5%. Japan's wage growth has been a sensitive topic for the world's third largest economy, since its stock market surge and real estate bubble in the 1990s. The market crash, coupled with a strong yen, low labor productivity, a shrinking population, and consumption tax, have been at the forefront of calls for tax hikes. Kishida has pushed for a record hike in the minimum wage by 1,000 yen in order to reform the Japanese labor market, and corporations have begun to follow suit. Japan's largest umbrella union had agreed to an average pay hike of 3.58% for this year, which would be the biggest jump since 1993. In May, the average salaryman's nominal wages rose by 2.5%, the biggest rise in 28 years. Bernadette Manuel for Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
AstraZeneca stock's value falls by nearly 14 billion pounds after a cancer drug trial results. Stephanie Mayo has the details.
Anglo-Swedish pharmaceutical company AstraZeneca's stock market value drops nearly 14 billion pounds after it published the first results from its phase 3 trial for a lung cancer drug called datopotamab deruxtecan that it may not be as successful as had been expected. AstraZeneca said the study showed that the drug could stop the progression of a patient's lung cancer longer than the standard for the chemotherapy drug docetaxel, but that it was too soon to say if the patient would also live longer. Investors wiped almost 14 billion pounds off the market value of the 174 billion pounds, with shares closing down 8% on Monday after receiving news that the drug trial result did not reach the threshold for statistical significance. Stephanie Mayo for Mata ng Agila International, trusted, connected, on point.
In the United States, the technology race for robot taxis causes a political divide. This after an anti-car group protested against the proliferation of robot cars. As part of their protests, the group is targeting driverless taxis operated by Waymo and Cruise. The group disables robot cars by placing stolen traffic cones from the street on top of the vehicle's hood. The group's actions have gone viral, making state authorities consider the expansion of driverless taxi operations in the city to a 24-hour paid service. This causes discord between state and city officials. Driverless cars were introduced in San Francisco in 2014 with a mandatory human safety driver on board. But 4 years later, California omitted its requirement for a human driver. However, incidents involving autonomous cars have been on the rise. Google launches its AI chatbot dubbed Bard in Europe and Brazil. According to Google, the AI tool can now be used in over 49 languages. Bard also has its new features of receiving audio responses and answering in 5 different styles. The tech giant unveiled Bard last February, but delayed its release in the European Union amid the bloc's plan to crack down artificial intelligence concerning its risks. The European Parliament backed a proposed law that will be a foundation for the world's first comprehensive rule for AI.
The International Olympic Committee, or IOC, announced that teams from Russia and Belarus will not receive formal invitations to participate in next year's Olympic Games in Paris. This because of the two countries' aggression against Ukraine. The IOC's condemnation of Russia and Belarus' participation in the senseless war in Ukraine was first issued in February 2022, soon after the full-scale ground invasion began. The organization soon followed a resolution of not inviting or allowing the participation of Russian and Belarusian athletes and officials in international competitions to protect the integrity of global sports competitions and for the safety of all the participants. However, even though the two countries will not receive invitations to participate as teams, individual athletes holding passports from Russia or Belarus may not be banned from Paris next year. Meanwhile, Australia's state of Victoria will not host the 2026 Commonwealth Games due to projected cost overruns. Victorian Premier Dan Andrews said that the cost of the Games, which was to be held in 4 regional hubs, could amount to more than $4.8 billion from a budgeted $1.8 billion if they went ahead. The Commonwealth Games Federation, or CGF, did not provide immediate comment, but said the pullout was beyond disappointing. The sporting event, for mostly former British colonies, has struggled to remain relevant, with 5 of the last 6 editions held in Australia or Britain. Andrews said the government will instead spend all and more of the legacy benefits on housing, sporting, infrastructure, and in tourism. For the first time in 60 years, a living artist has at least 4 albums on Billboard's top 10 simultaneously. Catherine Ortula has the scoop.
Taylor Swift has done it again. The pop and country music singer-songwriter has not only achieved her 12th #1 album on the Billboard 200 chart with her latest offering Speak Now, but she has 3 other albums on the top 10 list. This makes Swift the first living act to have 4 albums in the top 10 in over half a century. The previous record holder was American trumpeter Herb Alpert, whose 4 albums populated the Billboard Top 10 on April 2, 1966. Today, the 33-year-old Swift has achieved the same feat with the immense popularity of her albums Speak Now, Midnights, Lover, and Folklore. Prince may have had 5 albums in the Billboard Top 10 at the same time, dated May 14, 2016, but this happened after his death, therefore making Alpert and Swift in the entire history of music as living acts to have dominated the Billboard 200 chart with 4 spots inside the top 10, with the pop queen the first female to have achieved this milestone. Billboard said Swift had also become the first living artist to have 11 albums in the top 200 simultaneously. The Billboard 200 ranks the most popular albums in the US and elsewhere on a weekly basis. The chart's rank is based on multi-metric consumption as measured in equivalent album units compiled by Illuminate. Units comprise album sales, track equivalent albums, and streaming equivalent albums. Swift's latest offering, Speak Now Taylor's Version, is a re-recording of Swift's 2010 studio album. It has 22 tracks written solely by Swift. It also includes re-recorded versions of 16 songs from the deluxe edition of Speak Now and 6 previously unreleased From the Vault songs. It became her 12th #1 album on the Billboard 200, surpassing Barbra Streisand, who held the record with only 11 chart-topping albums. Catherine Ortula, reporting for Mata ng Agila International, trusted, connected, on point.
Mexican hospitals provide mental health therapy with the help of animals like Australian parakeets and Siberian huskies. 9-year-old Alessia Ramos, diagnosed with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, says that petting animals helps her relax and relieve her anxiety. Dr. Lucia Ledesma, head of mental health services at the Institute for Social Security and Services for State Workers, states quality time with animals gives neuropsychological changes to lessen stress and anxiety. The National Center for Mental Health and Palliative Care in Mexico has 8 dog therapists. One of these dogs is Harley, a dog that became viral during the COVID-19 pandemic. He enters hospital wards wearing a protective suit, boots, and glasses that inspire the efforts of medical personnel working long hours. Harley and his friends are a crucial part of the new mental health program in Mexico.
with that story, I want to shout out my 2 dogs at home because they really do just help ease all of my feelings. The best companions.
They do. And to start the week, here's a quote from the first black president of South Africa, Nelson Mandela. I learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it. The brave man is not he who does not feel afraid, but he who conquers that fear.
I mean, it's really simple. It's hard to conquer our fears, but we just have to face them.
That is so true. And there are many reasons we must feel afraid.
Yes.
But we should have bigger reasons to keep overcoming
those
the
fears.
fear.
Yes. And overcoming those fears, sometimes failing to overcome those fears is what makes us human.
Exactly.
And that's a wrap for tonight's news. Catch the latest updates on our social media channels. I am Gianna Llanes.
I am Nina Richie Elago Flores. This is Mata ng Agila International, trusted, connected, on point.